Common, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk to you. I'm a fan. You were on a show years ago that did not, in my opinion, get nearly enough attention. I believe it was called Hell on Wheels.
Yes.
I watched every episode of that show. I loved it.
Really? Thank you for checking it out, because you're right, Dan. Not a lot of people were aware of Hell on Wheels. It came on AMC in around 2012. I think it debuted, and it was a fun show. I thought it was written well. We had a great cast, but it didn't reach that level. Sometimes I think it's just everything is like divine timing, and for some reason that show didn't connect with the masses like some of the other shows that AMC had put out, which was, Breaking Bad and Mad Men. And we gave our best, and I really have to say that different people tell me they've seen that show, and I feel like honored that they've seen it. And it's different walks of life who didn't know anything about me or what I do, to say, man, I've seen you in this show called Hell on Wheels. So I'm grateful that I was a part of it. I got to ride horses too.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I'm curious, before we started the interview, you got up and lit something on fire. What was that all about? So
this is Palos Santo, and it stands for Holy Wood. And it's something that I do. I really enjoy it. It comes from South America, the trees from South America, in Chile. A lot of Palos Santo comes from there, and I light it. It's supposed to bring in the good energy and remove the bad energy. But I also love the smell of it, and it's just, I do certain things that just center myself.
Well, that actually leads us right into the subject of the day. I think a lot of people know you as a rapper and an actor. I don't know that most people think of you as, and also, by the way, you've written memoirs, so that's another thing you're known for. But I don't know that a lot of people think of you as a wellness guy. So I'm just curious, what brought you to this subject and this book?
Well, Dan, this has been my life I would say the journey started when I was 19, about just starting to take care of myself. And that first started with just diet, being aware of certain things and removing certain things from my diet, and then implementing things that really benefited me, as from a diet perspective, food and eating cleaner, to actually like rationing my drinking, because I dealt with alcoholism in my family, but then also just implementing my spirituality and also learning new things that I hadn't been introduced to when I was younger, like therapy and meditation, and just being like really beginning and developing and evolving that quest to love myself and take care of myself became what we know to be wellness. And because that has been what I've been living, and it's been probably the most important thing in my life, it comes out in my music, it comes out in my acting, it comes out in my activism, because it's who I am. So I felt it was important for me to share that, especially coming from the South Side of Chicago, a young Black man who, didn't hear these words or know anything about this type of lifestyle, or, until I was able to travel and see different and meet different people from different walks of life and see the world and start implementing these different pieces that help me to my wellness journey. And it's still, I'm still on the quest. I'm still learning. I'm still practicing this lifestyle, but I wanted it. You're right. I mean, people wouldn't look at me as a wellness guru, and I wouldn't consider myself that either. But I do have a story, and I have experienced a lot, and I made it a real point to give people access in my book to the people who have instructed me, who have led me and taught me in certain ways about wellness. So that's what you get actually in the book.
So wellness was not a concept that was raised for you when you were growing up?
No, I mean, the term wellness, I definitely didn't hear. I mean, we had gym class, but beyond that, I mean, I can't think of anything that we intentionally in my family and somewhat even, I won't say community, because we did have activities for us as kids to exercise. So that was, but just as a way of life, wellness wasn't a word, self-love wasn't a word, care for self wasn't a word, and it wasn't a practice. And we culturally, from where I grew up, we were eating anything that we liked. And that is not how, I believe we can achieve our best out of life. That is not how I've achieved my best out of life. Not my happiest moments or being at my best and highest self was not just doing everything that I like and just doing everything in excess. And I think that's what American culture in many ways, where I grew up, we had no knowledge of it. And, it was important for me I feel like a duty. If I've been introduced to something that is beneficial in life, it's my duty to share it with people. I obviously want to bring it back to communities that I come from because, they may not even been exposed to it. But people in general, I think is important for me to share, whether it's information, experiences, and all of the experiences are not always like, okay, I just decided to eat healthy and it just worked out. No, some of it is I'm talking about in the book, and then we rise. I'm talking about the journey and the obstacles and the ups and downs, and I'm still working on it now. And the things that I do to motivate me, and not feeling like working out some days, or not feeling like being positive some days. And how do I get to that positive space is what I share in the book and what I strive to do in my life.
I mean, I think that's very common. As somebody who, oddly, my whole life kind of revolves around these concepts now, and I see this in my own life and in everybody else that I talk to about this stuff, is that it doesn't just, progress isn't like a straight, unbroken upward trajectory. It's always bumpy, and I mean, that's just the way it goes. I'm curious, given your background, did you have any resistance when people first started talking to you about making changes to your diet, moderating intake of intoxicants, going to therapy, engaging in things like self-love? Were you all in right from the jump, or did you push it away?
My journey started with resistance. I am a person that sometimes likes to, if things are being told to me, and it's even, especially if it's popular, well, it wasn't popular then, but things are being told to me, I keep one eye open, meaning like, are you sure? Nah, I'm not. You got to really prove this to me. So I keep certain resistance, and I kept resistance from the standpoint of diet. What happened for me was growing up in Chicago, like I said, I ate everything that I loved. That included, barbecue, burgers, steaks, chicken, pizza puffs, French fries. I'm talking about every day, like just, when I had the ability to go out and eat, and pay for my food, I would go out and get stuff that I wanted that tasted like that. So at one point I had, friends of mine who were becoming more conscious. And ironically, through hip hop culture was one of the first times I really got introduced to what a vegetarian was, and even thinking about removing something from my diet, because certain rappers like KRS-One from the group Boogie Down Productions talked about this. And Eric B. and Rakim from the group Eric B. and Rakim talked about this. And I would repeat it and say it in my, say their raps, but I wasn't really thinking about everything that I was saying. And when I did, I was resisting it in a way where I had friends saying, man, you know you want better, you could do better. And why don't you think about, just deciding not to eat this every day? And I was like, man, that's not affecting me. I'm good. I'm dope on the mic. I'm doing, just saying things that really are ignorant, just to be resistant. But my spirit, my heart, my mind said, man, I want to be better. I want to be a better human being. I want to be better at this as an artist. And what are things that I can do for myself to be better? And I looked at diet as one of the things that I could do to improve. Also, cutting back on drinking was one of the things I could do to improve. And as I started to take those steps, then it was like, wow, I'm starting to feel power in other areas that I didn't even think about, like that this would affect.
What about self-love as a young man? Was that initially appealing, or did you resist that?
Well, I wasn't really presented with self-love as a concept, ideology, or even a practice. I think I resisted it because I didn't know I had experienced things in my life which made my self-love go down. It went below zero to a certain degree because of just, like, to be really candid, like, not having my father around initially, was something that affected my self-love. I didn't know that then, but it did. And, my mother actually remarrying and like another person coming into her life that's very important was affecting me. And I didn't know that then, but I know it now because of therapy and things that I've been through, discussing those things, which I would say as a young person, I didn't know how to embrace self-love. In fact, I was very, my self-esteem was not strong. It was not in the thing that was my strength. And it took me a lot of time to work on that and build that. I was strong in certain areas, but overall I was not, self-esteem was not like the place where I was like, yeah, I got it. And it took work. And so I'm thinking about when I even first was introduced to like wanting to, that didn't come till I was an adult, a young adult is when I started to think about self-love.
It's interesting you said self-esteem doesn't come naturally to you, because this is not always true. Hip hop is a vast art form at this point. But I was just watching the amazing documentary on Peacock about Run DMC, and it goes through the origins of hip hop. And I was alive for all of that. I remember when Sugar Hill Gang and all the other early rappers burst onto the scene, and it started as an art form where people were talking about how great they were. So it's interesting to hear you as somebody who has excelled in this art form as a rapper to say that self-esteem actually was not a strength for you.
Well, hip hop was truly an expression for us to talk about our greatness, to express it, to discover it. And I was discovering my greatness as a writer, as an MC, as a hip hop artist. And I felt like I could, when it was time for me to rap, I felt that confidence and I felt that strength and I felt that self-belief. But it was the other areas of my life that I wasn't practicing that I didn't believe. And those were very important areas because those were areas where I'm dealing with challenges of self-love, meaning sometimes I can get off the microphone after just saying I'm like, oh man, I'm dope, I'm fresh, and all these great things about myself, but then be in a relationship and dim my light and not be able to state what I need in a relationship or state who I am or say have boundaries. I could be selling records and releasing all these videos and being Grammy nominated but still I would get around other artists and feel like I'm not as popular as them, so I don't have as much value. And that is where like the line was drawn for me, where I was like, okay, I could say I'm nice on the mic and say all these things, but do I believe it beyond just the microphone? And do I believe it when the records are not being received well? That's when it got challenged, and I really discovered that deep down, I needed to feel that hole of not feeling that self-empowerment, self-love quality that I needed to work on it.
I can imagine it's hard when you have a big burst of popularity and then you get involved in some projects that aren't received as well, and you've got pre-existing, self-worth issues or lack of self-love. Though I'm just guessing those are really hard moments.
Very hard moments. And the truth is, when I released my first record, I didn't come out and just explode on the scene. It wasn't that for me. So I was able to build certain qualities which made me appreciate being an artist and being on a journey, and know that this is not a industry where it's just gonna like you're gonna be the star, and as soon as you come out, everybody's gonna pay attention to you. And that wasn't my story. But at the times when I did reach those heights, it's different when you get challenged when your community starts saying, like, the people that always loved you, like, oh, we don't like this record here. Oh, this one is not good. Or you feel like you are doing good, and then you get on the red carpet and all the cameras turn to Britney Spears at the time, and you're like, wait, I'm not as as valuable as I think in this. But it's like that taught me where do I put my value, and do I really believe in who I am beyond a platinum album, beyond an awards, beyond where the cameras are turning. Do I have that self-worth where it's like it's divine, it's coming from what God created me to be, and knowing that I'm a child of God just like you are, just like everyone listening is like this superstar that's maybe Jay-Z or Beyonce or LeBron or whomever that we hold up high and that I hold up high. I'm just as valuable. It took time for me to understand that, and our society, the world, can place value on certain things that they really are not going to fulfill you as a person, not in the long run.
I'm curious, you are definitely a grown man at this point. You've been through quite a bit. Does the self-confidence still falter at all? Are there scenarios or situations in which you might find yourself where you can lose the self-worth because the cameras are turning away, or because you're around people who are, by some measure, more popular or more successful?
I think the self-worth still gets challenged. It's not as much, excuse me, it's not as much about other people per se now. Like, I could be in a room with some of the most talented, gifted superstars ever, and I kind of now have an understanding of, man, I love their work, but I understand and respect and honor my value too, and my talents and my grace, and so it's less of that. The times where it gets challenged is where you really want a movie project, and they're like, we're going to these actors first, and you have to really realize, okay, well, these actors are more established, they have been more successful, and that's okay. And that might just be who they want. And you still hope and believe that maybe it might come around to you, but if it doesn't, then it wasn't for you. But in that process, you do get challenged when, you're looking to that a company is looking for an artist to do a marketing project with, to do it like a marketing campaign, and they like, we're going to go with this person instead of you. And it just lets you, it does humble you, but at the same token, my mother taught me some great lessons, because auditioning and getting turned down and other people getting roles and is like, it's rejection after rejection after rejection. And, my mother said something to me at one point, I don't know how long ago it was, but she was like, man, listen, you need to send whoever got that role some love, send them some light, and say a prayer that they do well, and know that that was for them. And your place is your place. And the more I really understand that, man, I feel like an adult. I feel like empowered. Life becomes easier. Now, that doesn't mean I don't feel the disappointment that I didn't get the role or that this job didn't happen. Like, I feel that, but I'm able to recover like quicker. I don't go into as deep of a hole. And I just feel better when I am sending light and love to someone, because I truly know what I'm here to do and who I'm created to be and what I'm purposed to be and do.
I used to be, for 30 years, I was a news anchor, and 21 of those years were at ABC News. And I got passed over for a million jobs and had that feeling of rejection over and over. And friends of mine would get big jobs, and it was very painful. And then, what part of the reasons why I'm not a news anchor anymore, and I do this stuff full time, is that I ended up spending a lot of time studying Buddhism. And in Buddhism, there's a practice that is essentially the same thing that your mother taught you. And this practice is called mudita, Mudita. And it is basically a kind of meditation in which you imagine people who are experiencing success and happiness right now, and you send them to the wish for continued success and happiness.
Wow.
And it's a skill, and it is sometimes said within the Buddhist tradition that it is the hardest mental skill to develop, because we are so hardwired to be envious, to be jealous, to compare.
Yes, Buddhita, that's a beautiful thing. And I have to say that in my journey to wellness and just living a happier life, I've come across some Buddhist literature. It was a book I remember in the late 90s I was reading, either called Awakening the Buddha Within, and it was a great book. And I also, it was another book that a friend of mine had given me that was powerful. But I really understand those practices of sending light to someone else and not letting your envy or jealousy hover over you and like block your own blessings and your own vision for yourself is truly one of the most challenging things. But the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And that doesn't mean you don't have difficult moments, because, man, it's been some projects I really was like, man, I should be in this. I want this. I just did a great audition. I left out like thanking God and saying, man, I got this role, but didn't get it. And it hurts, but it's like you do understand that on a greater level, on a higher level, that's why I talk about the higher self, that role was meant for the person who got it. And what I'm supposed to have, and even that experience that I had in the audition, was really just part of my journey and part of what I'm supposed to be going through. And embracing that and looking at some of the good things that did occur sometimes, because we are so goal-oriented in the world, or maybe I like to say America more, because that's where I spent most of my life, and that's where I've seen sometimes I go other places, I don't feel it as strong as, like, meaning work, get this to this goal, and that's it. But that being said, to get the value in and victory, and also knowing like, oh, I went in that audition, I did my best, and I actually did a good job, and I didn't stress myself, is something that I have had to learn to look at and appreciate and value that too, because it is always like, get the role, the goal is the role, but sometimes the goal is what you've experienced through it, even though if you wanted that goal of the role, but the true gems and the true jewels might come in the experience if you can see it that way.
Yes. Sometimes the gem comes hidden in a huge bag of shit.
Man.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, yes. It definitely does. But, you know, like, Dan, one of my greatest gems about believing in myself, came in my greatest, like, heartbreak. My first, like, adult, like, love that I thought was the love for life. And in the same parallel to that was my album that I released, and it was flopping from the critics to the sales. And I was really challenged at that time to just feel like me and be like, feel like, who am I and what? Like, I was going through it in the dark ways. And that shit started to turn golden, because I was just like, I can't keep just being in the dumps. I got to do something. I got to pull myself up. I got to lift myself up and use whatever resources I have to build and see why. Because I don't believe in like things that we experience like that. I believe it's a why to it. And that why will give us the gems, the jewels that we need to move forward, to build stronger character and aura and person, you know, as we look at those lessons and get those gifts of whatever that difficulty brought us.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think how I feel. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and my thoughts are not like completely together on it. But well, I have a friend. Her name is Sebene Selassie is her last name, and she's a meditation teacher, and she has a tattoo that she got recently called it says "Trust Life." It's not exactly how it's not my language per se, but she's a woman who has gone through cancer 4 times and recently got divorced. And her argument is, I think if I'm stating this correctly, it's something along the lines of, this shit that happens to you is supposed to happen to you because it did happen to you. I don't know if there's any like magical or metaphysical aspect to her argument, but basically it happened to you. That's non-negotiable. Are you going to learn from it or not? And you might even argue that it was the universe. And I don't know if I could go all the way to this, but you could even argue that it's the universe, you know, giving you what you need.
Yeah. I have to support her in trust life philosophy and belief that, listen, I believe as human beings, we have a lot of dominion and power, and we do invite, you know, and create certain things in our lives. But I do believe it's an overall soul path that exists for us, that those difficult times that do come into your life, where it does happen, is actually like meant to happen for you to understand yourself more and actually grow through it and become greater, because I believe that we all are here to reach our higher selves. Like it's almost like if we were writing a story, you know, a script is like, okay, this person has come to this story to go through these things so that they can come out the hero. And I do and the hero is not perfect, but the hero has been through things and you've seen them overcome, and they have all the qualities that make them a hero now. But, you know, the dope thing about being a hero in the way we're talking about is those qualities are just like being able to love yourself, being considerate of others, being aware and conscious of things, being socially responsible. Like those are some of the attributes of the hero that I'm talking about once you go through these life steps in this story that get you, you know, to that level. And I do believe is I know it seems difficult because within just like a week I was at a book signing and I met this woman who was in a, you know, she was disabled because she was in a car crash hit by a drunk driver. And I couldn't help but feel for her because this was for, you know, this beautiful woman that I know like years ago, she was in this car crash with her child. Her child made it through and is not, you know, like disabled, but she was, and she was working from her chair, moving it around. And I just couldn't help but think, man, like, I know that at times she has to go back and think like, man, this happened 4 years ago. Before that, I was walking and I was just a person that was walking and had these abilities, and now she doesn't. And I know her why would be even more difficult to find out why, but it might even be harder to overcome and be like, yeah, this is the reason why, and my character is stronger. But I would pray and hope that she was even able to find out that the why in that and overcome it to the extent where she's able to live a life that she feels is happy and full. And, you know, I hope the things that we talk about and how we share these thoughts are seeds to help people become that.
Agreed. The 10% Happier podcast is available ad-free over on our companion meditation app, which is also called 10% Happier. And you will get the episodes a week before everybody else does. Download the 10% Happier app right now to get started for free. You mentioned a book signing, so let's talk about your book. There are 4 areas in the book: the food, the body, the mind, and the soul. If you're up for it, I'd love to walk through these, you know, in brief, and people should go read the book. But when you talk about food, you mentioned earlier, I think are you a vegetarian or even a vegan?
Yeah, I'm a vegan at this point, and yeah, I took it step by step. I was, like I said, I ate everything, and then I decided to remove pork from my diet, and then I removed beef, and I saw how I felt. It didn't have to do with any other books that I read or what others had told me. I was like, man, I feel strong. I feel clear. Like, I could even listen to records that I've made from back then and listen to records that I make now and hear how much less mucus is in my vocals. And I just saw the results, and I just chose to continue to live that lifestyle. And listen, when I started eating vegan, the foods weren't that good. It wasn't getting that delicious, you know, vegan meal. But I made the adjustments because I knew it was what I wanted for my life. I knew it would take this type of discipline to get to where I wanted to be in life. And I saw how it was benefiting my life in other ways. And I love food. So, you know, eventually at times I would go back to fish when maybe after 10 years of being a vegan, I went back to eating fish, and then I just went back to vegan maybe 5 years ago. Listen, I'm talking about this only because it's really about awareness and just deciding to put good things into your body. Being a vegan is not for everybody. You have to choose what's right for your body physically and for your life. And, you know, water is always going to be good. Vegetables is always going to be good. Not as much, you know, if you can remove white sugar from your diet, that's always good. Any doctor, Western, Eastern, will tell you that, that eating fruits and vegetables are going to help benefit you. And that doesn't mean you have to take out everything else. So, I mean, my belief is to just start learning and be aware and just take one step at a time. So even drinking more water a day is helpful. And I do believe that foods affect our emotional well-being, and they also help our preventative towards diseases, and can help heal when you're dealing with diseases. And I'll give you a brief example. I have a cousin who is in Chicago who was dealing with lupus, and she was close to death. And her doctor, who had been working with her throughout this time, told her, after, all the medicines she had given her, she said, listen, I need you to eat a raw diet for a month. A raw diet. She was close to death. 3 weeks later, after just eating raw foods, non-cooked foods, they could barely detect the lupus. The lupus had gone so loaded, like they could barely detect it. And she was like, man, that changed my life. I mean, she's not eating raw every day now, but she understood the power of what the foods could do, because it was the foods. She didn't change her medicine or anything else.
So you're not trying to give readers a specific program. You're just saying, look, you should care about this and follow what your body's telling you when you eat clean.
That's it. Simple as that. I provided in the book, because I had access to nutritionists and healthy chefs. I provided from Chef Lauren Vanderpool some things like, just some juices you can make, foods you can eat, shakes that you could, protein shakes. Just provided some of those things, but it's exactly what you said. Just eat clean, be aware, and see how you feel.
And what about for the body? What are you recommending in this part of the book?
The body, and I want to say the reason why I did these 4 pillars is because they are truly all connected. And for the body, I just am suggesting some form of exercise. For a long time I was vegan, but I wasn't exercising. That actually was cool, but it didn't get me to the highest level. And I'm believing the highest level of being. Highest level is like a more consistent happiness in itself. And what I found out, and it's only because I was given an opportunity to be in my first film and I needed to bulk up a little bit, exercise. So I started working out. And I realized every day I worked out, I had less stress. And I just felt like happier about things. And I also looked at it and realized that it was also a way of just taking care of myself. Whatever I went into that gym with that morning, it wasn't on my mind heavy while I was working out. And even when I finished, I kind of had a different perspective. Not that it was gone, but I just had a little bit of a different perspective, because endorphins is real. Endorphins is, and when you getting those workouts in, is real. Now listen, when I say body, it's also like loving your body too. Loving and taking, that's part of it. And working out, and it doesn't have to be, if your workouts are a walk, let it be that. Like, I was talking to a naturopath doctor who was like, I was having a lot of brain fog from the times from the time I had COVID. I was dealing with brain fog, and she was telling me, man, go take some walks. That helps your brain. I was like, what? She said, yes. So if it's a walk, I've been walking more than I ever have in life, and I used to look at elders and see them walking and be like, man, that's what you do when you get old. And then I was like, nah, I'm doing it now. Well, or whether I'm in that age group or not, I'm just doing it because it's something that's like healthy for me, and it helps my mind too. So the body has to do with that aspect of not only movement, but it's also loving your body too.
You said they're all connected in that, and you mentioned the mind. That's the third pillar. you're pretty open about going to therapy. Can you, if you're comfortable, can you say a little bit more about why therapy has been so helpful to you?
Well, therapy has been super beneficial because I found myself in situations, relationships, especially where I was repeating the same thing. I would be in a cycle of fear at times, lack of commitment at times, things that I just wasn't able to fulfill, like a happy, full relationship, because I wasn't my full self, because I had my own fears and own traumas that I didn't know I was carrying with me. We like to call it baggage. I had that baggage. And I was fortunate to be, I was actually trying to buy property or buying property in Brooklyn when my realtor would just talk to me. And then I found out, I was going through this difficult time, and she would talk to me, and she was a licensed therapist. And I would like leave those like viewings and be like, man, I feel better. And she, said, you want to do any sessions? And I was like, yeah, we should do some sessions. I started going to therapy with her, and we started identifying things that was causing me to repeat these cycles and causing me to fear in relationships and causing me to distance myself and causing me to dim my light. And we started working on it. And with that consciousness of it, I was able to start building and being better and working through my issues and not putting the blame on that person or not running away, but actually dealing with it. And within that therapy, it also made me dig deeper to things that I had tucked away that had happened to me when I was younger, that I had ended up having to deal with so that I could be better. And it actually gave me a more empowered and happier life because I dealt with those issues. And listen, I get on the phone sometimes with my therapist, it could happen. I was probably on the phone with her last week or, so it's not something that you just do and then you're done with it. You may continue to go back when you need it. And it's beneficial. And I would, anybody who is living and has been through any traumas, or even if they don't recognize it or just find themselves in a rut repeatedly or in this repeating things in their lives that they don't want, I truly strongly suggest it. And so many people, I suggest it anyway, just because it helps you just in different aspects of dealing with people and dealing with yourself and figuring out why you in this mood when nothing seemed like something happened, or why did this situation when this person said this to me like hurt me so much and get me so angry. I think therapy allows you to resolve those things in ways and get to your best self and not have things weigh on you so much. So I've really strongly suggested, and within the mind also, meditation has been something that has helped me also. And I know you're a Buddhist, so your meditation may be even stronger. Like as far as, like, I don't meditate long. I meditate for a little bit of time and it feels great. But it's whatever works for you. But the mind is important, because you could be like, yeah, I'm about to work my body and blah, blah, blah. But if your mind isn't there, then your body is not truly being fulfilled at the highest level and being, maximized at the highest level. Because your mind, your body is actually following your mind. That's why you hear athletes talk about their mental process being as important, if not more important, than the physical. So your mind has to be there, and that's why that connection is important.
Well, tell me about, you say you don't meditate for long, but what does your practice look like?
My practice is me getting to a quiet place, breathing deeply, putting a light of where, into my mind and seeing that light and setting intentions. And sometimes just trying to let thoughts come to my mind and remove them. Go. come to my mind and go, and trying to get my mind still and quiet. That's what my meditation contains, and that's what it's about. And I've learned that from the different places that I've meditated at and people that I've meditated with, what works for me. Because I've been in a meditation where I don't think there's nothing wrong with it, but I've been in it and I fell asleep because it was like, 45 minutes and I just couldn't do it. But I probably needed to sleep. But the point is, I found what works for me, and mine is really about getting my mind still and not letting my mind race and setting those intentions.
Not that you need my approval, but it sounds great. And my meditation teacher is this 80-year-old or almost 80-year-old guy named Joseph Goldstein, and one of his expressions is whatever works.
I love it.
You found what worked for you.
Yes.
I can't help but think, as we're talking about the evolution of hip hop, which I know we talked about earlier, but it's on my mind because I just watched this documentary, as I said, about Run DMC, which I recommend. It's really good.
Yeah, I have to see that. That just by the way, Run DMC was one of the groups, if not the group, that made me want to really get into hip hop. Like they were like what we talked about earlier about defining that greatness and just expressing that. They brought that to us, and to see these young brothers, these young black men just expressing themselves in that way, and the music was so good, and they were so cool, and I related to them. Run DMC, they were it for me. Them and LL Cool J. So, I got to check the documentary.
LL's in the documentary, and they talk a little bit about the rivalry between Run and LL Cool J. And, they were a huge group for me, too. I mean, I'm 52, and so, Sugar Hill Gang came out when I was in grade school, and then Run DMC, Sucker MCs, and It's Tricky, and all those songs that really hold up to this day. They were dropping when I was in junior high and early high school, and so it was great to go back and hear their story from this vantage point, as they're grown-ups telling it retrospectively. But just back to you, I mean, those early days of hip hop, the art form really was about shouting from the rooftops about how great you were as an MC in all aspects of your life. And now we're at a point where Kendrick Lamar can rap about meditation. You're on this podcast talking about therapy and meditation. And I don't know, to you, does that speak to this to the evolution in this great American musical genre?
Yes, I definitely believe it speaks to the evolution and maturation of people who've grown up in hip hop, people who've come from the environments that hip hop first was rooted in, people who've actually had the blessing of being exposed to new things. The fact that Kendrick will rap about meditation, and I've rapped about, and talked about therapy, and so many other artists also have talked about that and talked about self-love. And these are things that, when we first started, it was, I guess, for our own confidence, and what we needed at the time was to feel like we are great and we got it all together. And this is, at certain times you need that. Like when I hear about people from the 60s and 70s in those movements, they were saying black is beautiful and black power, because they needed to feel powerful and they needed to feel beautiful. Like, so sometimes you just have to say it to yourself to feel it and to know it. I call it the Muhammad Ali theory. Like, he was saying things that, and he brought them into fruition. They manifested, but he was saying them, and he said them because he believed it, but he also said it to affirm his belief and probably put it out there. And, and I think hip hop we needed that early on, just as young Black and Latino kids coming from where we came from. We needed that. And now we know, okay, that's an aspect of us, and this is Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, we all need to know, like, okay, we have this these great aspects about us, and greatness is the capacity that we have, but we also have been through some things, so we need to talk about those things. And what are the ways to get to your higher self and your best self and greatness and joy and happiness. And that's what, I feel hip hop is evolved to, some of the aspects of it. And that's what, I'm discussing in the book, And Then We Rise.
Yeah. Speaking of the book, there's a quote in the book where you're talking about how bragging comes from self-doubt, and there might have been a compensatory element to some of the bragging we saw early in hip hop, and the fact that people can be more open and real now, speaks to big changes in the culture, I think.
Yeah, because I was just having this conversation with Sabrine, who I work with, and we were talking about, you don't feel one thing all the time. Like, you're just not always positive, and you're just not always happy, and you're just not always like feeling like, man, I'm confident. That's just not the way we are as humans. And I think hip hop really early on started talking about things that were bothering us, things that we were like feeling strong about, things that we saw in society that we didn't like. So I can think about like some of the things that Tribe Called Quest talked about, or some of the things that Brand Nubians talked about, or KRS-One discussed, that like were real things that people were experiencing. Even Pete Rock and CL Smooth, They Reminisce Over You. That's about family and growing up in this community and trying to figure out who you are and like honoring someone who passed. So we were able to get somewhat vulnerable, but now it's at a point where we can discuss some of the issues that we hadn't talked about, like molestation. That's something that I talked about in a song. Like, I never would have thought about doing that, because I didn't even like acknowledge that had happened in my life. But it was because of music and me maturing and growing that I felt the freedom to express it. And I think, as the immortal words of Biggie, they lived for so long, we never thought that hip hop would take it this far. It's not only just like the hip hop is such a big phenomenon, and it's just like has moved the world in so many ways, but it's also the evolution of who and what we're expressing. And it's what you're saying, Dan.
I have a 9-year-old son. I played him Biggie about a year ago, and he said it sounded too old-fashioned, which was a really devastating moment in my life.
Yeah, maybe, hopefully he might come back around when he's 17, 18, who knows? But I'll tell you this, my daughter, when she had to be like 8 years old, and I was playing Lauryn Hill, mm-hmm. And her and her friends, I was taking them ice skating, and she was like, "Hey, can you play some music that was made after 1997? Because that's when she was born. Can you play some music that was made after that?" And I was like, "Man, what is going on?" But now she knows that Lauryn Hill is one of the greatest, and she will come to me like she knows Pete Rock and CL Smooth, or just, I'm like, wow, okay. So, it's hope for your son out there, that Biggie may reach him later on the path.
Speaking of Biggie, I'm friendly with his son, and who's a lot younger than I am, but and I went with CJ to a performance at Lincoln Center recently, where they had a classical music rendition of Biggie's songs, and it was unbelievable. Yep. People were losing their minds. It was quite moving, actually.
Let me tell you, Notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, is one of the greatest artists of all time, and for him to do what he did in 2 albums, and I mean, he's one of the consummate MCs, because he had a flow, a voice, lyrical content, cleverness. He could perform well. He knew how to make hit songs. He had it all. And that's not, I mean, there's some things that if I'll check those boxes, I don't check some of those boxes. So it's like Biggie is that guy that just, man, he was he's definitely in my favorites. And I love that when you get to hear hip hop, because I've been doing some of that myself, is like doing symphony shows and performing with orchestras in different cities. And I love when you get to hear the music in a different like tone, a different text, context. And it's just like people sitting in an orchestra hall and they listening to hip hop, but it's like with this whole big orchestra, and it just sounds beautiful. So I can imagine Biggie's music just being phenomenal.
It was really amazing. Okay, so before I let you go, let's talk about the fourth pillar, the soul.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that when you say the soul?
You know, the soul is, to some people, it's kind of hard to describe, because when you say, man, my soul feels this, it's not a like practical, concrete, tangible thing that you're describing. But in my journey of being well and being my best self, the soul has been one of the most important things, because I'm really referring to spirituality and tapping into your spirit and what that means. And for me, I'm a believer in a higher power. I believe in God, and I believe God exists in all of us, in all mankind, womankind, all. And I believe God created the heavens and the earth. And I believe we're reflections of the Most High. And our soul's quest is to reach that highest level and become the highest self as we're on this planet. And my soul's journey has been dealing with opening up to different things that I had experienced and dealing with the difficulties, but also evolving through it to become stronger and sharing those things through art, through acting, through music, through speaking. And I feel like that's part of a soul's purpose, is to do what you are destined to do on this planet. And it's important for us to find out what that is. As you talked about, like, you being the anchor for a long time, and you delivered what you delivered, but, you know, and you were there for that for a reason, but you're doing this now is probably fulfilling you in a different way in your soul, and also affecting other people in a different way. And I think for me, the soul is about tapping into that purpose, into your divine self, and being able to offer that in the highest level for yourself, but to also inspire and give to others. And, you know, like I said, I talked about it for me coming through my spiritual journey. And that didn't just, though I'm a believer in God, like I said, it didn't just stop in like, okay, I was raised going to church. It was like, no, I believe in God, but I believe God is working through books of Buddhism and practices in Buddhism. I believe God is working in Islam. God is working in Judaism. God is working in Christianity. I just believe that God is working through us, and we have these different paths to get to the Most High. But you know, we know when we there. Like you could be like, man, I could sit there and be like, man, I'm a Christian, and I could be right. And you could say, man, I'm a Buddhist, and somebody could be like, man, I'm a Muslim, and we all could be vibrating on the same level, talking about the same things, sharing in the same values, and have beliefs and treating people in the same, you know, with love. And I believe we all serving the same God is my belief.
I want to say one thing before I let you go, which is you mentioned something earlier that I didn't acknowledge, which is that you had been molested when you were younger. I just want to say I'm sorry that happened to you, and I think it's very impressive that you're able to talk about it now and rap about it now. So sorry to let that go by unacknowledged.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. And it's something that, you know, man, it was, to be honest, I had tucked that away in my life for a long time. And it only came up because I was doing a film that was dealing with that. And then I was in the scene rehearsing it, and I was with the actress Laura Dern, and I was like, wait, this has happened to me. And I mean, I had to revisit it for myself, and then I went through these different moments of, you know, sitting down, having sessions, talking about it with my therapist. But then, you know, at a resort I was at, I just had a reading and I brought it up, and it just, you know, I had to go through my own process and healing. And the music was something that I just decided to write about it, because it was something that you don't hear a lot of us share, especially as men, as Black men, as people. And I remember being at book signings because I talked about it in my previous book, and so many men came up to me and said, man, thank you for sharing that and speaking on that, because, you know, they had experienced it too. And so, you know, it's something that, you know, I only talk about it because I believe it's something that feel okay with talking about, and it's something that I want to be able to stop the cycle. So I want others to know and be able to heal and be like, oh, it's okay for me to share this in a place where I'm sharing it because I want to stop the cycle and I want to heal. So, yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that. And I want to respect your time by letting you go, given that I've held you long. But thank you very much for doing this. And the book is called And Then We Rise. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan. It's been a wonderful time talking with you.